So, let's talk about the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. It's got to be one of the most prestigious awards on the planet, right? But it comes with this huge, lingering controversy. Is the economics it celebrates actually a science?
Okay, I love this quote from Reddit because it just gets right to the point. It really frames the central question we're tackling today. Is this incredibly prestigious prize celebrating a hard science, or is it something else entirely?
You know, the controversy kind of starts with the name itself. This award wasn't even one of Alfred Nobel's original prizes. Its official title is the Sveriged's Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel. And that word, sciences, well, it's doing a lot of heavy lifting here.
And that really is the core question, isn't it? When we think of science, we think of physics or chemistry, fields with predictable, repeatable experiments. So can economics, which studies the messy, often irrational world of human behavior, really be put in the same box? Let's dig in and weigh the evidence.
First up, let's make the case for economics as a science. And the argument really boils down to two key things: the use of super rigorous theoretical models and some pretty sophisticated ways of testing them out in the real world.
So, the first piece of evidence, these elegant, complex, mathematical models. And look, these aren't just abstract equations floating around in space, they're actual tools designed to explain incredibly complex real-world stuff, from how markets work to the very nature of our financial system.
For instance, take the idea of liquidity creation. This was a core concept in the work that won the 2022 Nobel. It explains this almost magical thing that banks do. They turn long-term, locked-up investments into the cash that we can just pull from an ATM anytime we want. How does that even work?
Well, the Diamond Dybbuk model shows us exactly how. It basically frames banking as a system of sharing risk. It uses pure mathematical logic to explain not only how banks make our economy run more efficiently, but also why they're so fragile and at risk of bank runs. This is economics acting like a science, creating a formal framework to explain a system we see every day.
But hey, economics doesn't just sit around theorizing. The second part of the argument is that it actually tests these big ideas using incredibly rigorous methods, many of which are borrowed straight from fields like medicine.
And the gold standard here is what's called a randomized controlled trial, or an RCT. The idea is actually pretty simple, but it's so powerful. To know if something really works, you create two basically identical groups, and you give a treatment, like a new government policy, to only one of them. Any difference you see between the two, well, you can be pretty sure it was caused by that treatment.
So, for example, just observing things, you might see that villages with mosquito nets have less malaria. But is it really the nets, or is it something else, like maybe those villages also have better sanitation? An RCT, famously used by Nobel laureate Esther Duflo, gets around this. By randomly giving out nets to some villages and not others, researchers can isolate the exact impact and find out what really works to fight poverty.
Okay, so as scientific as all those methods sound, there's a huge counter-argument. For a lot of people, the ultimate test of a science is its ability to predict the future. And on that front, the record of economics is, let's just say, complicated.
And Exhibit A for the prosecution has to be the 2008 financial crisis. I mean, despite decades of those sophisticated models we just talked about, the vast majority of mainstream economists totally missed the boat. They just didn't see the collapse coming. And that was a massive blow to the field's credibility. This sentiment is everywhere. I mean, if a discipline can't reliably predict the biggest events in its own backyard, can you really call it a science in the same way you call physics a science? It's a really fair question.
But maybe the problem goes even deeper than just prediction. See, unlike atoms or planets, the subjects of economics are people. We have beliefs, biases, fears. We operate inside these incredibly complex social structures. That human messiness makes prediction almost impossible, and it kind of forces us to look not just at the science, but at the scientists themselves. So if economics is all about studying human systems, what does the prize itself, which is a human institution, tell us about the field? Well, when you start looking at the data on who actually wins, some pretty stark patterns emerge. Just look at this number. Across all Nobel fields, almost 3/4 of the prizes have gone to laureates from just 10 countries. That points to a really deep structural imbalance in who gets recognized for doing top-tier work.
And this chart makes it crystal clear. You see this incredible dominance of the global north, with the US, the UK, and Germany way out in front. You can even see how that dominance has shifted over time, from Europe to North America.
But the imbalance is even more profound when you look at gender. In more than 100 years of these awards,
women make up this tiny, tiny fraction of the winners. It's a gap that just keeps persisting, and it raises some serious questions about who gets recognized.
I mean, just look at this chart. It's overwhelming. If economics is a science that's trying to understand human society, it has to deal with the biases in its own structures. So, how do we tie all this together? The powerful models, the failures in prediction, and these demographic biases.
Well, it turns out the work of a recent Nobel laureate might just give us a framework for making sense of all these contradictions.
This is where Darren Acemoglu comes in. His big idea is that what truly determines success or failure for whole countries, for economies, and maybe even for academic fields isn't just talent or resources. It's all about the rules of the game, the institutions that govern us.
Acemoglu basically breaks it down into two types. You've got inclusive institutions, which encourage lots of people to participate and innovate, leading to shared prosperity. And then you have extractive ones, which do the opposite. They concentrate power and wealth for a small few, which ultimately stifles growth.
And this brings us right back to where we started. If we use Acemoglu's lens, we can stop asking, is economics a science, and start asking a much better question. What if we analyze the Nobel Prize itself as an institution? Is it an inclusive one, encouraging a broad search for knowledge? Or is it an extractive one, concentrating prestige and influence in a few predictable places?
At the end of the day, what if this whole debate isn't really about science at all? What if the patterns of who wins, which ideas get celebrated, and even what questions get asked in the first place tell us more about the rules of the game in economics than any single model ever could? It's definitely something to think about.